The agenda, what I would like to look at it is that first give you, most of you would have a real understanding of Agile and DevOps, but how the analysts look at it and what is that they tell in terms of continuous testing and DevOps and how DevTestOps, coined by Forrester, has come into existence and how quality engineering can help you out in this whole world. What are the different kinds of testing streams and engineering activities which needs to be taken up. One of the one which Mark was mentioning about was previously is about security testing. So how security testing in terms of being ingrained from a shift left perspective and how other types of testing can be done from a shift right perspective. So primarily it's more about how we take up testing and what does analysts talk about. So continuous testing is pretty important in DevOps, both from Gartner and Forrester, who say that testing is to be done continuously and how you would approach Agile or DevOps, how the DevTestOps comes into picture in terms of shifting left and making it faster right from the requirements part of it till the end of the digital transformation, where a lot of speakers have spoken about how digital transformation has been looking at it. So how do you test it at the shift right, at the production? So testing in production, testing in from requirements. So how the whole wide array of from requirements to production needs to be tested upon, and how it is not a single step anymore. Gone are the days in the waterfall where you would do testing after the whole software is being built and you would run through it. But right now it is from the requirements. How do you test it? How do you test the requirements? And then you move on from from a build, unit testing, and from then development, QA, staging, pre-prod, and prod. How of each of those, and right from how do you take a continuous feedback from each of those areas and go back and forth and understand what are the different types of testing which has to be done and what has been missed out and what needs to be further improved upon. So primarily a lot of ways you look at it when you talk about Agile and DevOps. A lot of tools come into play, and there are factors which inhibits the whole aspect of change management in terms of embracing this whole DevOps and Agile world, and at the same point of time having different types of tools in place to look at it, how collaboratively you would use different type of tools, and no single tool would help you out in this endeavor of getting onto the journey of DevOps, and how you can get automated, how do you do different types of automated testing. And when you look at it from an application architecture or ecosystem or a landscape aspect of it, there are different things to be tested upon, and no single tool will help you out achieve that. So you would need to have different types of tools, and at the same point of time decide upon, embark a journey of what is the framework you would look at it, which would help you out and use this continuous testing framework, and to do an end-to-end automation, both from a functional and a non-functional perspective. What is that framework which help you out, and how does it collaborate with different types of tools in this DevOps ecosystem? So that is where is pretty important, and that's how continuous testing can be looked upon in terms of it. So quick statistics and ways how they've looked from Forrester DevOps heat map in terms of what is the adoption rate in terms of it, and how does it really helps out quality engineers in this perspective? Because a lot of organizations, they say that it's DevOps, so it's development and operations, and where does testing fit into this bill, and how is it? So each of this will have at any point of time a quality gate to be tested upon, and what are the different aspects of it, and how the change has been embraced upon. And the most important part of it is like the culture and the people, where in an organization, how do we embrace this change and how do we take the first step forward? A lot of our colleagues have asked here in terms of what would be the kind of first step to take up anything. So making a change is a big one, and at the same point of time, what is the first baby step you have to take, and how do you look at it? So take up a low-hanging fruit, make it successful, and make sure that that's making your moving gun in terms of it, how you take it to the next step. Because the first project being successful in DevOps or Agile will help you out in putting it into the next project and how you can embrace to that change. So culture and people comes first, and of course you need to have a process, as Mark was also telling about how the metrics and the governance and the measurement needs to come into picture once something is being set up. So the process driving that, it is important. And all of this is because of the release velocity, which is the pivotal part of it. And a couple of things in terms of how it is, how it has been embraced in terms of both the infrastructure and operations, and also at the same point of application delivery and deployment. All of this has been taken care in terms of the way they have been adopted is much more faster, because a lot of organizations have been taking this up. And infra and operations, when you look at it from a continuous delivery and deployment, and application from a continuous integration part of it, how that has been taken care. And a couple of these are more of examples from the Forrester group, and this is more from how DevOps adoption is growing. So enterprises versus small medium business, how it is taking fast growth in terms of the adoption from 2015 to 2016. It's almost like 33 to 36% up in terms of the adoption, and how we go to this change. And at the same point of time, the biggest aspect of it is also the cloud, how we have taken the cloud infrastructure usage in terms of using both Docker and also the configuration management tools like Chef and Puppet, how each of them have been embraced in terms of it. And what are the different types of tools and how the containers are helping it out, and how the enterprise is adopting to these part of it? How many of them have already adopted, and how many are looking at adoption? So that's a big chunk of industry moving towards it, as you already know. And in terms of how quality engineering will help you out in this aspect of it is the couple of next slides, which I would like to look upon. This is across adoption and strategies across different vertical segments, how each of them have taken. We've worked with different organizations. I work for Signity Technologies, which is a pure play independent testing services organization. So we have worked with different kinds of vertical segments where how DevOps has been embraced and how automation has been looked upon in those vertical segments. So primarily everybody is joining the bandwagon of automating it, and most of them start off with an internal application, and external application is based more on the retail industries. And the healthcare industries, which we have worked with, also have embraced this in terms of adopting it for compliance and regulatory mechanisms. Though they have huge regulatory systems in place, but they have been also joining this. So coming up to the topic in terms of how DevTestOps and continuous testing is key to the DevOps success. So DevOps has been coined around 10, 11 years back in a conference, and the way it has been integrated in terms of more towards how development operations do work hand in hand, and how is the emphasis on automation and analyticals happen, and how the process reduces from months to hours, and what it is. But from a DevTestOps, if you have to look at it, equal importance have to be given to testing with respect to development and operations, for the fact is that anything you go in has to be tested upon, and that's where the software developer development engineer and test has been coined up, where you would have people who understand not only simple functional testing, but more from an automation perspective, from both from a functional and a non-functional aspect of it. That means not only in terms of we are talking about unit testing, but we are talking about functional testing, we are talking about integration testing, we are talking about API testing, and also from a non-functional perspective, performance and security, how that can be automated in the value chain. Because a lot of these organizations, when they move towards it, they want to have a continuous integration pipeline, and how each of these tests kick in when the continuous integration starts off. And as we said, it's more of an end-to-end automation perspective. How do you take the complete ecosystem of automation into aspect of it for a faster thing? And when you say fail first, fail fast, fail often, early defects detection. So early defects detection. So the whole aspect of it is to, as soon as you automate and you test something, you fail something, then you get a feedback out of it, and then you again retest it. So that's more about understanding it before it goes into the production part of it. And the most important part of the whole aspect of it is that when you set up all this testing stuff, how do you communicate across different projects, different programs, different products and applications, and how the collaboration happens, and what are the different kinds of metrics and KPIs which needs to be tracked upon, and how well the testing aspects of it would deal into it. Because at any point of time, you want to set up a quality gate to make sure you move the build from even if it is one stage to the other stage in the same environment or to another different environment. What are the quality gates you would like to look at it from an automation perspective, from a functional perspective, from non-functional perspective, and how is that being tracked upon? So that's where this comes into picture in terms of DevTestOps. So this is a pretty primary and preliminary terms of DevOps in a nutshell, where you look at it both from how you get the build development done, your automated unit testing, and static application security testing, which we had a couple of minutes ago pretty discussed in terms of what are the different kinds of vulnerabilities in the code and how that has to be tracked upon. And at the same point of time, once the build is packed and it has been deployed across, what is the continuous testing you need to do from a functional and a non-functional? And once you deploy it in the production, what are the different kinds of monitoring alerts you'd get? And how do you take that feedback loop into it and again retest and get it done? So that's in terms of a very high level aspect of it. But how does continuous testing and delivery leveraging the quality engineering elements come into picture? So when you look at it in terms of it, let's say it's an application under test which has a client layer app, different kinds of components and web server, hypothetically in terms of it. So what are the aspects you would like to look at it? What are the different kinds of tools you would like to get in place with respect to the application landscape, which will really help you out? What are the different types of data that is needed? One of the primary challenges a lot of organizations do face is that what is the test data being available for us to test different kinds of flows? It becomes pretty complex and cumbersome in terms of when you look at it from different kinds of applications getting integrated into it, and one particular flow when you have to test upon, you need a specific type of test data to make sure that it passes. Otherwise, the script fails at the end of the day because the data is the one which actually drives it. So data engineering comes into picture, where it is very important for us to look at what is the data engineering aspect of it and how we go ahead and do it. And we also briefly touched upon the service virtualization in the previous sessions, and I think we do have another session which is in depth and service virtualization. So how does service virtualization help us in testing in terms of it? Because developers use mocks and stubs and get those work done, but to test an end-to-end system and have it automated in perspective of it, and not having basically availability of different kinds of services at your disposal for testing. So service virtualization becomes a very important component on it. And how do you make sure that what kind of services needs to be virtualized first? That's one of the areas which you need to look at it, and how that can help you out in doing an end-to-end automation in terms of it. Take up the priority of external services which are available only for key things, or where you would spend dollars in terms of it for services being able to allow. So in the lower environments, non-production environments, you need to have those services virtualized and have an end-to-end automation for a lot of integration to be done. And at the same point of time, when you look at it from a UI perspective, the UI aspect of it has to be automated, but that's where the smaller amount of automation is happening, lesser amount of automation is happening to be. In fact, the more automation is being done at the API level, so that you would have a very strong base on it. And at the same point of time, more amount of unit testing is being done, because gone are the days where you have a monolithic application architecture. It is more of a microservices a kind of a distributed architecture where each of the single component needs to be tested upon. So unit testing is pretty important in that aspect of it for a continuous perspective. And at the same point of time, as we discussed more on the functional and the non-functional automation of it, of course, when you move towards the right side of shift right and want to try to test on different components in the production and get a feedback of it, you would be having a feedback directly from the monitoring systems, but also testing in the production gives you a perspective of how things are happening and how there has to be done. So doing a resiliency testing from the performance side of it, and also breaking it systematically in the production and seeing how systems would actually rebuild. That is one more part of it in terms of making it pretty dynamic in nature and see how things happen. So what happens if an API service gets turned down? What are the different kinds of effects do you have, and how does your aspect work on it? Because typically if you are working on different microservices, each service, which service is interdependent on which service has to be figured out to make sure that you have a fallback option of it. So that's in continuous testing. So typically we have seen organizations reaching DevOps journey, and they do have their own way of looking at it from a process, culture, tools aspect of it. But however, the most important part of it is the automation maturity to make sure that you reach that particular journey. And what are the different kinds of ROI factor? Gone are the days where you have an automation ROI perspective because you are no more testing a huge regression suite base. It's more about continuous integration, and time to market is the one which is the factor which you need to look at it from an ROI. So faster release velocity is where you would like to look at it. So when you see that, when you start off from a no automation in place, you would like to see the low-hanging fruits of having a functional testing being done, automated, and then take care of the non-functional testing automated in an automated fashion, and then move towards continuous integration and continuous delivery and deployment tools, and then primarily also have an shift left and shift right, the dual shift approach of it. From the way it is looking at it, is you would definitely need to be agile, and once you are an agile, you want to transform to a test-driven development or a behavioral-driven development framework or an acceptance test-driven framework based on what you would like to look at it, and then move towards the DevOps journey. So primarily, if you have to look at it, a lot of moving components in terms of the whole aspect of it. So you need to look at it, tools, you need to look at different environments being available for testing. That's one of the key aspects which gets missed out. And once you do have the delivery, continuous delivery, you do it across different non-production environments, and then you move towards the production environment, it becomes more of a deployment, which is a delta, because you've been doing similar things for the past few months. So how does quality, what are the key quality engineering elements in terms of when we look at it from a testing perspective? So the first one is, of course, the unit testing and static application security testing, where you would like to look at unit testing to be done with the integrated IDE, and at the same point of time, static application security testing is pretty important so that you would have all the code-related vulnerabilities to be caught in the initial stages of it. So once you move towards a dynamic application security testing, it's more of not only the application in sense, but application with respect in conjunction with different applications and in conjunction with a network and other elements which would help you out in doing. So securing the application in that particular aspect of it from a static code analysis would really help you out in terms of how you can take it forward. And at the same point of time, as Mark was mentioning, it's not one single time that you do a code review and forget about it. It is a continuous kind of program with the remediation in place, where you would test it, make sure that all the vulnerabilities have been fixed, and then again retest it, and then move towards another new code and again test that. So that whole aspect of it continues. So which build needs to go with static application security testing, that needs to be designed so that you can trigger those particular code reviews automatically, and also have a manual code review in conjunction with it to make sure that anything which is missed by the tool, primarily tools will have false positives and false negatives. Positives can be dealt pretty easily, but negatives are the ones which needs to be tested with a structured framework where you adapt to an OWASP or OpenSAM depending upon what it is and move forward. So other three aspects in terms of it, when you break it up, it's automation, but automation from a functional standpoint, automation from a performance standpoint, automation from a security standpoint, you need to look at it. So how do you integrate your continuous integration platform to do all of these tests, and how that is taken up in terms of, you would have a test automation framework and a test automation tool and a test management tool in specific, and how all of these three can be integrated into it and run specific tests on a specific build in aspect to it. And from security testing, dynamic application security testing after the static ones has to be triggered, and the similar fashion of result analysis and manual analysis, also a manual test to be done from a dynamic aspect of it. From a performance standpoint, a lot of organizations are moving from a performance testing to a performance engineering situation, where they want to understand a particular scenario and see how each, in that scenario, if there are 5 components, which component is being taken care, what's hogging the limelight in terms of it, and how are your response time SLAs being met in that particular scenario, because gone are the days where, of course, you do have load testing in perspective, but performance engineering comes into aspect of it, where you would like to see single user tests run through it and see how it is happening and how the performance testing stuff is worked upon in terms of it. So what is the performance testing tool that would be really needed for it, and what are the different kinds of scenarios which needs to be tested, because you need to have a workload balancing to be done. So how each of those scenarios would need to be worked upon. And the other part of it is that the post-production, which we're talking about, the monitoring, what are the different kinds of monitoring tools, and how does that have a continuous feedback into your lower environments to make sure that you're looking at it and also making sure that all of those problems in terms of from the monitoring tools which are being reported have been checked upon and tested across. So when we are speaking about the DevOps journey, we did speak about test-driven development and how each of those can be integrated or blended with DevOps aspect of it. So primarily unit testing, functional testing, and integration testing are the 3 things which you would like to look at it. So what are the different kinds of feature specifications which needs to be inputted to the requirements, and how those features have to be broken into functions, and how that automated configuration needs to be applied upon, and how is the whole CI/CD framework being done. So unit testing in terms of how each of those unit tests needs to be run, the integration and performance tests needs to be worked upon, and see how they are being looked upon in terms of when the developer runs, what happens, and then when you make a change, how it passes through it. So other concept which we have discussed about the service virtualization aspect of it, primarily a lot of the service virtualization tools are now being deployed on cloud, and it's not only Amazon but any other cloud aspect of it. And each of those service virtualization tools do aspect in terms of different applications, mainframes, ERPs, legacy, which are not available for so many reasons. What are the different types of configurations needs to be done, and how do you want to look at it? So you would like to leverage Docker in terms of it to enable continuous integration of these code changes and see how it is, and at the same point of time test across different situations and different integrations, and have an end-to-end automation being done in that particular aspect of it. we've seen this in terms of how continuous integration versus delivery versus deployment happens in terms of it. The most important aspect of it is from a testing perspective is that what are the quality gates which you would like to move from a continuous integration to a delivery to a deployment, each of those, and what is that is needed. So whether the build is approved to be deployed across different kinds of environments, and once it is done, how it can be automatically deployed, and also testing the different kinds of environments available, because we do not have a monolithic environment. It's more about like containers and farms and images. So whether that particular environment which is actually tested upon well and that is ready to be deployed for application deployment, that needs to be tested upon also. So this is typically what we have seen in couple of client organizations which we worked upon in terms of doing a continuous automation right from requirement stage to in terms of automated testing from a test automation aspect of it, and also at the same point of time how each of these has been compiled and built, and how is it being orchestrated across a different pipeline where you look at it from requirements. You can use any specific tool. This is something specific which we have utilized in terms of different organizations. So right from requirements, documentation, repository maintenance, build, package, deploy. So each of these places where testing needs to be done from an automated state of affairs, both from a functional and a non-functional, has to be done. And then once it's been deployed as a in a Docker environment with a rancher, how each of those will integrate with different monitoring tools, and how that actually used as a on-demand test bed to make sure that all of those are available and ready to be testing upon. And finally, in terms of it, how do we look at it in terms of a collaborative platform or a dashboard? What are the different kinds of, we have spoken about different tools being available, and there is no single source of truth to really get all of the tool-related information onto a particular platform. Take informed decisions more from what are the prescriptive measures to it, what are the predictive measures to it, what can be looked at from these tests, how are they being done, or you want to diagnose them, how the last 5 tests have been taken care, and what is the significant difference, and what are the actually game changers in the last 5 to 10 tests, how are we improving from a different kinds of metrics, and what are the different KPIs we collect with respect to different kinds of roles, whether it is a CIO, a vice president, or a director, or an engineer, what kind of activities have been done on that particular application, and where are we with respect to the release readiness, what is the cost of quality. So all of this is important in terms of it, and having a live dashboard getting included into different of these tools will help you out figure out how the whole quality engineering journey is being taken care, and how the quality gates needs to be established for each of those. So as a quality engineer, you are the gatekeeper to make sure that the right application is being deployed, and what kinds of tests have been done, and have we taking an informed decision rather than just saying that, oh, there is no high priority defect, it's a medium priority, we can live with it, we can fix later in a day or two, but our sprint cycle ends tomorrow, so we need to get it deployed, is the kind of way a lot of organizations have been looked upon. So move away from that. Using a collaborative dashboard will help you out understanding and taking an informed decision rather than taking a kind of a perception-based decision, which you are not aware of what happened in terms of not only from a functional perspective, but also from a non-functional perspective, how the application would stand for a different kind of load, or how the application would stand for an attack in terms of it. So that's where different kinds of tools getting integrated in different phases make you help to understand what is your CI/CD pipeline and how are the different tests being run across.